My boyfriend left me for a wealthy woman, saying I had no ambition. He doesn't know I just sold my startup for $50 million. Brennan made the announcement over lukewarm Chinese takeout, as if breaking up with me was just another Tuesday night task. Veronica understands what it takes to succeed, he said, not even looking up from his lo mein. She's building an empire. You're content working from your laptop in pajamas. I nodded quietly, spooning fried rice while he explained how Veronica's pharmaceutical company had just landed a government contract, how she owned properties in 3 countries, how she represented the kind of future he wanted. I need someone who shares my vision, he continued. Someone ambitious. The irony was suffocating. For 2 years, I'd been coding 18-hour days, building an AI platform that could revolutionize supply chain management. I'd eaten ramen for months to afford server costs. I'd turned our spare bedroom into mission control, surrounding myself with whiteboards covered in algorithms. Brennan had rolled his eyes every time I mentioned investor meetings. When Hartwell Industries first expressed interest, I'd try to share my excitement. He'd cut me off to talk about Veronica's new yacht. The final documents had been signed that morning. $50 million for 3 years of my life's work. I'd been planning to surprise him at dinner. Instead, I watched him pack his designer luggage and drive away in his Mercedes, a car I'd helped him afford. 3 days later, my sister texted, "Turn on Channel 7, now." The news anchor stood outside Veronica's headquarters while FBI agents carried boxes toward waiting vans. The caption read, "Pharmaceutical CEO arrested in $200 million fraud scheme." I watched Brennan's ambitious future crumble in real time. My phone rang. Brennan's name flashed on the screen. By the 6th call, curiosity won. Thank God. His voice was shaking. Veronica's been arrested. The FBI froze everything. I have nothing. Can you loan me some money? I stared at my laptop screen, where my bank balance showed 8 figures. How much do you need? I asked. Maybe 5,000? I know it's a lot. That's not a lot. Not anymore. Silence. What do you mean? Brennan, remember that little hobby you thought was pointless? I sold it yesterday. For $50 million. The silence stretched forever. You're joking. Hartwell Industries announced it this morning. Turns out I had ambition after all. Another pause. So, will you help me? I smiled, remembering every eye roll, every dismissive comment. Actually, I have a better idea. Meet me tomorrow at Meridian Country Club, 2 p.m. But that's members only. I know. Don't worry, I'm buying lunch. The next day, I sat in the club's private dining room watching Brennan's beaten Honda pull up. He walked in wearing his best suit, the one I'd bought him last year. We ordered lunch. I chose lobster. He ordered salad. $50 million, he said carefully. Give or take. We can fix this, can't we? What we had was special. I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder. Open it. Inside were architectural blueprints, property deeds, investment documents. I'm starting an incubator, I explained. Buying the old Meridian building downtown, converting it into a startup hub. I need a CEO, $200,000 salary plus equity. His face transformed with disbelief and gratitude. You're offering me the job you always wanted. There's just one condition. Brennan leaned forward, hope flickering in his eyes. Anything. You'll be working for me. Not with me. For me. You'll report to me, take direction from me, and implement my vision. The same vision you spent 2 years calling a waste of time. His smile faltered. And there's something else, I continued, sliding another document across the table. This is a personal services contract. If you take this job, you'll also be responsible for my dry cleaning, grocery shopping, and apartment cleaning every Friday. You want me to be your assistant? I want you to understand what it feels like to have your worth questioned, to have someone dismiss your potential while benefiting from your work. Brennan stared at the contract. The salary was real. $200,000 plus equity would solve all his problems and set him up for life. But the humiliation was equally real. How long would this arrangement last? 1 year? Then we renegotiate based on performance. He picked up the pen, then set it down again. This feels like revenge. This is an opportunity. The kind of opportunity you never thought I was capable of providing. I watched him wrestle with his pride. The Brennan I dated would have walked out, thrown some insult about me being vindictive. But this Brennan, the one facing eviction, whose girlfriend was in federal custody, whose future had been tied to someone else's fraud, didn't have the luxury of pride. If I say no, then you say no. There are no other conditions, no hidden clauses. You walk away and we never speak again. He signed the contract. That night I sat in my apartment, the same one where Brennan had rolled his eyes at my hobby, and called my sister. Please tell me you didn't just hire your ex-boyfriend, she said before I could even explain. I might have. Why would you do that to yourself? It was a fair question. For 3 days, I'd been riding high on vindication. Watching the news coverage of Veronica's arrest had felt like cosmic justice. Learning that Brennan was financially ruined should have been enough. But seeing him sign that contract, watching his hands shake as he realized his entire future now depended on the woman he'd dismissed, that felt like completion. Because he needs to understand, I said finally. He spent 2 years making me feel small, making me question whether what I was building mattered. Now he gets to see exactly how much it was worth. And if he's a terrible employee, then I fire him. Rich people fire people all the time. My sister laughed. Listen to you, rich people. She was right. I was still adjusting to the reality of my situation. $50 million was more money than I'd ever imagined having, more money than my parents had made in their entire lives combined. The number felt abstract, like a high score in a video game rather than something real. The check from Hartwell Industries was sitting in my desk drawer. I'd deposited a smaller advance payment the week before, but the final payment felt too significant to handle through my phone's banking app. I planned to take it to the bank in person, like people did in movies. Monday morning arrived with Seattle's usual drizzle. I dressed carefully, Not because I cared about impressing Brennan, but because I wanted to feel like the successful entrepreneur I'd suddenly become. Black blazer, dark jeans, boots that cost more than my old monthly rent. Brennan arrived at my apartment at exactly 9 o'clock holding 2 coffee cups and looking like he hadn't slept. "Figured you might want coffee before we start," he said, offering me one of the cups. I accepted it but didn't thank him. We weren't friends anymore. We weren't anything anymore except employer and employee. "First stop is the bank," I said, grabbing my purse and the check. "Then we're meeting with contractors at the Meridian building." The bank visit was surreal. I'd never deposited a check with so many zeros. The teller called over a manager, who called over another manager. They offered me investment services, private banking, something called wealth management. I nodded and smiled and took their business cards, but mostly I felt like I was playing dress-up as a rich person. Brennan waited in the marble lobby, scrolling through his phone. When I finished, he looked up expectantly. "How does it feel?" he asked as we walked back to my car. "Weird. Like I'm pretending to be someone else." $50 million and you feel like you're pretending? I stopped walking and looked at him. 3 days ago, you told me I had no ambition. Now you want to know how it feels to be successful? I'm trying to understand how I got it so wrong. You didn't get it wrong. You just never bothered to pay attention. The Meridian building was a 6-story Art Deco structure downtown that had been empty for 3 years. I'd found it through a commercial real estate website, fallen in love with the soaring ceilings and huge windows, and made an offer the day after the Hartwell deal closed. The contractor, a woman named Delilah who'd renovated half the tech offices in Seattle, met us in the lobby. "This is going to be incredible," she said, leading us through the space. "Open floor plans, modern infrastructure, but all the character intact." She walked us through her vision: collaborative workspaces on the lower floors, private offices for more established companies higher up, a conference center on the top floor with views of the Sound. "How many startups could this accommodate?" I asked. "Fully built out? Maybe 40 companies, 200 entrepreneurs. You're looking at an 18-month construction timeline, assuming permits go smoothly." Brennan took notes on everything. He asked smart questions about electrical capacity, fiber optic installation, security systems. Watching him work, I remembered why I'd been attracted to him in the first place. When he focused on something, he was impressive. The problem was, he'd never focused on me. After the contractor left, we stood alone in the empty lobby. Afternoon light streamed through tall windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air. "This is really happening," Brennan said. "Were you expecting me to change my mind?" "I guess I thought you might cool off, realize this was just an emotional reaction." I turned to face him fully. "You think building a startup incubator is an emotional reaction? I think hiring your ex-boyfriend might be." He wasn't wrong, but he also wasn't completely right. "Brennan, for 2 years you watched me work. You saw me take meetings, write code, pitch investors. You watched me sacrifice everything to build something meaningful. And the entire time you treated it like a phase I'd grow out of. I know, I was wrong about that. Were you wrong? Or did you just not care enough to pay attention?" He didn't answer immediately, which was answer enough. "The incubator isn't about you," I continued. "It's about creating something that supports people like I was. People working out of spare bedrooms and coffee shops, building the future while everyone around them thinks they're wasting their time. And hiring me? That's about you. Specifically, it's about teaching you to recognize ambition even when it doesn't look like what you expected." We spent the rest of the week visiting potential vendors, meeting with architects, and establishing the legal structure for my new company. I decided to call it Meridian Labs, after the building. Simple, professional, and vague enough to encompass whatever directions we might grow. Brennan threw himself into the work with surprising dedication. He researched startup accelerators in other cities, created spreadsheets comparing different business models, and drafted preliminary marketing materials. If he resented his situation, he hid it well. On Friday evening, as specified in his contract, he arrived at my apartment with cleaning supplies. "I can't believe you're actually making me do this," he said, standing in my doorway with a bucket and mop. "You signed the contract. I didn't think you were serious. I'm paying you $200,000. I'm always serious about that much money." I sat on my couch with a glass of wine, watching him clean my kitchen. It should have felt satisfying. Payback for every dismissive comment, every rolled eye, every time he'd made me feel like my dreams were silly. Instead, it felt hollow. Halfway through organizing my closet, Brennan stopped and looked at me. "Why are you really doing this?" "Doing what?" "This whole thing. The job, the humiliation, keeping me around when you could hire anyone." I set down my wine glass. "Because you broke something in me, and I need to understand if it can be fixed." "What did I break?" "My trust in my own judgment. For 2 years, I let someone I loved make me feel worthless. Even when I knew I was building something important, part of me wondered if you were right, if I was just deluding myself." Brennan sat down on the edge of my bed, still holding a stack of my sweaters. "I never thought you were worthless." "No, you just thought I was unambitious." Which felt worse, because ambition was the only thing I was sure I had. I was threatened by what you were building. You were so focused, so certain about your direction. I felt like I was standing still while you moved towards something I couldn't even see. This was the most honest he'd been since signing the contract. "So you decided to find someone who made you feel better about standing still." Veronica made me feel important, like I was part of something big. And what I was building was small? I thought it was just theoretical. Code and algorithms and meetings that might lead nowhere. I watched him fold my sweaters, his movements careful and precise. And now? Now I see I was wrong about everything. Your theoretical code is worth $50 million. Veronica's empire was built on fraud. I backed the wrong horse in every possible way. Is that an apology? It's an acknowledgement. I'm not sure I deserve to apologize. He finished organizing my closet and moved on to the bathroom. I followed, leaning against the doorframe while he scrubbed my bathtub. Brennan, do you remember what you said to me the night you left? I said a lot of things I regret. You said I was content working from my laptop in pajamas, like that was evidence of my lack of ambition. He stopped scrubbing and looked up at me. I was wrong. You were. But you were also right about one thing. I was content. I loved the work I was doing. I loved building something from nothing, solving problems, creating solutions. The fact that I was happy while doing it didn't make it less valuable. I know that now. Do you? Or are you just saying what you think I want to hear because you need this job? It was a fair question, and we both knew it. Both, he said finally. I need this job, but that doesn't make my regret less real. I left him to finish cleaning and went back to my couch. Through my living room window, I could see the lights of Seattle stretching toward the sound. 6 months ago, I'd been writing code at my kitchen table, wondering if I'd ever find investors who understood my vision. Now I owned a building downtown and employed my ex-boyfriend as my personal assistant. The transformation felt too rapid to be real. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister. How was day one of being Brennan's boss? I typed back, complicated. Good complicated or bad complicated? I stared at my phone trying to find the right words. Brennan emerged from my bathroom, cleaning supplies in hand. All finished, he said. Same time next week? Unless you quit before then. I'm not going to quit. Why not? This has to be humiliating. He set down the bucket and looked at me seriously. Because watching you build this company might be the best education I've ever had, and because I owe you a year of my life for the 2 years I wasted of yours. After he left, I called my sister back. He's not what I expected, I told her. How so? He's actually good at the work. Smart, organized, dedicated. If I'd met him in a professional context, I probably would have hired him without all the drama. And personally, I'm not sure revenge is as satisfying as I thought it would be. Are you developing feelings again? God, no. But I'm realizing that hurting him doesn't heal whatever he broke in me. My sister was quiet for a moment. What would heal it? I don't know yet, but I don't think it's this. Despite my doubts about the personal arrangement, the professional side of our relationship was thriving. Brennan threw himself into building Meridian Labs with an intensity that surprised me. Within 2 weeks, he'd created a comprehensive business plan, researched potential tenants, and established relationships with local universities and venture capital firms. I think we should host a launch event, he suggested during one of our morning meetings. Invite local entrepreneurs, investors, media, show them what we're building before the construction is finished. How do you propose we showcase an empty building? Virtual reality tours, architectural renderings, panel discussions about the future of Seattle's startup ecosystem. It was a good idea. A great idea, actually. What would an event like that cost? Maybe $30,000, including venue, catering, technology. We could hold it at the Four Seasons, make it feel premium. Do it, I said. But I want final approval on the guest list. Of course, you're the boss. That phrase, you're the boss, had become his standard response to my decisions. Always delivered neutrally, without resentment, but also without warmth. We'd established a professional distance that felt sustainable, but strange. 3 weeks into our working relationship, Brennan submitted his first formal report, 15 pages detailing market research, competitive analysis, financial projections, and timeline milestones. It was thorough, well-written, and genuinely insightful. I read it twice before calling him into my apartment office. This is excellent work, I said, holding up the printed report. Thank you. I mean it. This is the kind of strategic thinking I needed but didn't know how to do myself. I'm glad it's helpful. His response was polite but guarded. We were still dancing around the fundamental weirdness of our situation. Brennan, can I ask you something? Sure. Are you happy? I mean, setting aside our history and the unusual circumstances. Are you enjoying the work itself? He considered the question carefully. Yes, more than I expected to. Building something from the ground up, being involved in every decision, it's the kind of challenge I've always wanted. But it's strange working for someone who knows exactly which Chinese restaurant makes me order lo mein when I'm stressed. I laughed despite myself. You're stressed? I'm unemployed, living in a studio apartment, and financially dependent on my ex-girlfriend who just became a multimillionaire. Of course I'm stressed. Is the work helping with that? The work is the only thing keeping me sane. That evening, I found myself thinking about our conversation. Brennan's report had revealed something I hadn't expected. He was genuinely talented at business strategy. His insights about the Seattle startup ecosystem were sophisticated and well-researched. His financial projections were conservative but optimistic. If I'd hired anyone else to do this job, I would have been thrilled with the results. The complicated part was that I had hired someone else. I'd hired a version of Brennan I'd never met before. The version who paid attention to details, who asked smart questions, who treated my vision with respect and seriousness. I was starting to wonder if the problem hadn't been Brennan's lack of ambition, but his lack of direction. When he'd been dating me, he'd been working a corporate job he hated, living a life that felt predetermined rather than chosen. Veronica had represented escape from that life, even if the escape was ultimately illusory. Now, building something from nothing, he seemed energized in a way I'd never seen before. My phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Hello? Is this the woman who bought the Meridian building? The voice was elderly, careful, unfamiliar. This is she. May I ask who's calling? My name is Dorothy Chen. I used to work in that building back when it was Chen and Associates, my late husband's accounting firm. I sat up straighter. What can I do for you, Mrs. Chen? I saw the article in the Seattle Times about your startup incubator. I wanted to tell you about the building's history. Some things you should know before you open your doors. I'm listening. The Meridian building was built in 1923 by a man named Theodore Walsh. He was one of Seattle's first venture capitalists. though they didn't call it that back then. He specialized in funding inventors and entrepreneurs who couldn't get backing from traditional banks. That's fascinating. I had no idea. The building housed dozens of small companies over the years. Everything from airplane parts manufacturers to early radio broadcasters. Theodore believed that innovation happened when you put creative people in close proximity to each other. Sounds like he was ahead of his time. He was. But more importantly, he was successful. 3 companies that started in the Meridian Building went on to become Fortune 500 companies. The building has a reputation in the local business community. What kind of reputation? People say it's lucky. That businesses started there have a better chance of succeeding than businesses started anywhere else. I smiled. Do you believe that? I believe that buildings absorb the energy of the people who work in them. The Meridian Building has 90 years of entrepreneurial energy soaked into its walls. Mrs. Chen, would you be interested in coming to our launch event? I'd love for you to share some of these stories with our guests. I'd be honored. But there's one more thing you should know. What's that? Theodore Walsh had a rule for the companies that worked in his building. They had to commit to helping the next generation of entrepreneurs. Every successful company that graduated from the Meridian Building was expected to mentor or fund other startups. A pay-it-forward system. Exactly. Theodore believed that success was meant to be shared, not hoarded. After Mrs. Chen hung up, I sat in my apartment thinking about legacy and purpose. I'd started Meridian Labs partly as revenge against Brennan, partly as a way to support entrepreneurs like my former self. But Mrs. Chen's story suggested a deeper significance. Maybe the building I'd chosen wasn't an accident. Maybe there was something meaningful about continuing Theodore Walsh's vision in the same space where it had begun. The next morning, I told Brennan about Mrs. Chen's call. That's incredible, he said. We should definitely incorporate that history into our marketing materials. It's more than marketing. I want to build Walsh's pay-it-forward requirement into our business model. Every company that reaches a certain level of success commits to mentoring or funding the next cohort. That could work, creates a built-in support network, and ensures long-term sustainability. You sound surprised. I'm always surprised when good ideas get better. We spent the morning researching Theodore Walsh and the original Meridian Building tenants. Brennan found newspaper articles from the 1920s and 1930s describing Walsh as a patron of innovation and the building as Seattle's laboratory of the future. Look at this, he said, showing me a 1932 photograph. Walsh hosted monthly dinners for all the building's entrepreneurs, called them collaboration dinners. The photograph showed 24 men in suits gathered around a large table, their faces animated with conversation. We should revive that tradition, I said. Monthly dinners for all our tenants? Why not? Create opportunities for cross-pollination between companies. Maybe some of our best successes will come from unexpected collaborations. Brennan made notes on his tablet. I'll research venues and catering options. No need. We'll host them in the building once it's renovated. The top floor conference space overlooks the sound, perfect for evening events. That's 18 months away. Then we'll wait 18 months. Some traditions are worth doing right. Working with Brennan had developed a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. He anticipated my needs, asked the right questions, and executed decisions efficiently. If I hadn't known our history, I would have assumed we were perfectly matched business partners. The problem was, I did know our history. Every time he presented a well-researched proposal, I remembered how he'd dismissed my research as irrelevant. Every time he showed enthusiasm for our vision, I remembered how he'd called my vision unrealistic. Every time he demonstrated intelligence and insight, I remembered how he'd made me feel stupid for believing in my own work. The cognitive dissonance was exhausting. Can I ask you something? I said one afternoon as we reviewed architectural plans. Of course. Where was this version of you when we were dating? He set down his pen and looked at me directly. This version of me didn't exist when we were dating. What do you mean? I mean, I've never had to work for something I actually wanted before. Everything in my life was handed to me. College paid for by my parents, job arranged through family connections, relationships that fell into my lap without effort. So this is just about money? No, it's about purpose. For the first time in my life, I'm building something I believe in, working for goals that matter to me personally. My goals. Your goals that I've come to understand and care about. I stared at him, trying to process this distinction. Brennan, are you saying you needed to lose everything before you could appreciate what you had? I'm saying I needed to face consequences, before I could understand the value of what I'd taken for granted, including me, especially you. The conversation felt dangerous, veering too close to emotional territory we'd been carefully avoiding. We should get back to work, I said. Of course, but can I say one more thing? I nodded reluctantly. I know this arrangement is temporary. I know when my year is up, we'll renegotiate or go our separate ways. But I want you to know that working with you these past few weeks has been the most professionally fulfilling experience of my life. Thank you. That means a lot. And I want you to know that I understand why you needed to structure things this way. I understand why you needed me to feel what it's like to have someone else control your professional future. Do you resent it? No. I'm grateful for it. This job saved my life. That evening, I called my therapist. I'd been seeing Dr. Rodriguez sporadically since the breakup, mostly to process the emotional whiplash of my sudden success. Tell me about working with Brennan, she said. It's confusing. He's genuinely good at the job, which I didn't expect. And he seems to understand why I structured things the way I did, which I also didn't expect. How do you feel about that? Conflicted. Part of me wanted him to fail, to prove that I was right to feel dismissed by him. But he's not failing. He's thriving. Does his success diminish your vindication? Maybe. If he's actually a capable person who is just in the wrong situation, then what does that say about why he treated me the way he did? What do you think it says? That maybe he wasn't malicious? Maybe he was just lost? How does that change things for you? I don't know. It's easier to hate someone who hurt you on purpose than someone who hurt you accidentally. Do you want to hate him? I want to feel like my anger was justified. Was it? Yes, but maybe it doesn't need to be permanent. The launch event for Meridian Labs was scheduled for a Thursday evening in November. We'd sent invitations to 300 people and expected about half that number to attend. The guest list included local entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, university administrators, and media representatives. Brennan had arranged everything perfectly. The Four Seasons ballroom was decorated with architectural renderings of the renovated Meridian building. Stations around the room showcased virtual reality tours of the planned spaces. A panel of successful Seattle entrepreneurs discussed the importance of startup support infrastructure. I gave the opening remarks, explaining my vision for Meridian Labs as a continuation of Theodore Walsh's legacy. Mrs. Chen, whom I'd invited as guest of honor, shared stories about the building's history and the pay-it-forward tradition. The response was overwhelmingly positive. By the end of the evening, we had inquiries from 27 potential tenants and commitments from 3 local VC firms to participate as mentors. This was a huge success, Brennan said as we packed up the materials. You did incredible work organizing this. We did incredible work. This was a team effort. As we loaded boxes into my car, a woman approached us. Excuse me, are you the founders of Meridian Labs? I'm the founder, I said. This is Brennan, my business manager. I'm Amanda Fletcher from TechCrunch. I'd love to do a feature story about what you're building. We scheduled an interview for the following week. As Amanda walked away, Brennan turned to me. Business manager? Would you have preferred assistant? I would have preferred partner. The word hung in the air between us. Partner implied equality, shared ownership, mutual respect, none of which accurately described our current arrangement. Brennan, you work for me. That doesn't make you less valuable, but it does make the relationship clear. I understand. I feel like a partner in everything we're building. You're an employee who's deeply invested in the work. There's a difference. Is there? When I'm staying up until midnight researching market trends? When I'm personally calling potential tenants to gauge interest? When I'm putting together proposals for investors? Yes, there's a difference. You're doing all of that because I'm paying you to do it. Is that really what you think? That I'm only working this hard because of the salary? I stopped loading boxes and looked at him directly. Brennan, what are you asking me? I'm asking if there's any scenario where this becomes a real partnership, where we build this company together as equals. After what happened between us, after the way you treated my ambition when we were together, people change. Circumstances change. Some things don't change. Some things can't be undone. What if they could? They can't. The conversation ended there, but the tension lingered. Over the next few weeks, as media attention around Meridian Labs intensified, the question of partnership versus employment became more prominent. The TechCrunch article, titled From Heartbreak to Startup Hub, How One Woman Turned Professional Dismissal into 50 Million Success, portrayed me as a brilliant entrepreneur who'd overcome personal and professional obstacles to create something meaningful. Brennan was mentioned only briefly, described as the business manager helping to implement the vision. When the reporter had asked about our working relationship, I'd been careful to position him as a talented employee rather than a co-founder. But as I read the article, I wondered if I was being fair. Brennan's contributions to Meridian Labs were substantial. His strategic thinking, market research, and operational planning were as crucial to our success as my initial vision and financial backing. If we'd been strangers who met through professional channels, I might have offered him equity by now. The complication was that we weren't strangers. We were 2 people trying to build a professional relationship on the foundation of a failed personal one. Congratulations on the TechCrunch piece, Brennan said when he arrived for work Monday morning. Thank you. I thought they did a good job capturing the vision. They did. Though I notice I barely made it into the story. You knew that would be the case when you took this job. I did. I'm not complaining. I'm just observing that our working relationship is getting more public attention, which might raise questions about equity and ownership. What kind of questions? Investors and potential tenants are going to want to know who has decision-making authority. They're going to want to understand the management structure. He was right. As Meridian Labs grew from concept to reality, the informal nature of our arrangement would become problematic. What are you suggesting? That we formalize my role, create a proper employment agreement with defined responsibilities and clear reporting structures. That sounds reasonable. And that we discuss whether my contributions warrant equity participation. There it was, the conversation I'd been avoiding. Brennan, equity isn't just about contribution. It's about risk and investment. I'm the one who put up the money, who owned the original vision, who took the financial risk. I understand that. I'm not asking for equal partnership. I'm asking for recognition that this has become more than a traditional employer-employee relationship. How much equity are you thinking? 5%. Vesting over 4 years, contingent on performance milestones. 5% of Meridian Labs, if successful, could be worth millions of dollars. It was a significant request. I need to think about it, I said. Of course. Take all the time you need. That evening, I called my lawyer to discuss equity structures and vesting schedules. From a purely business perspective, giving Brennan a small equity stake made sense. It would align his incentives with the company's long-term success and provide motivation for continued excellence. From a personal perspective, it felt like rewriting history. If I gave Brennan equity in Meridian Labs, was I essentially rewarding him for leaving me? Was I saying that our breakup had led to something beneficial for both of us? The questions kept me awake most of the night. The next morning, I asked Brennan to meet me at the Meridian building construction site. The renovation was progressing rapidly, with the ground floor already framed out for open workspace areas. What do you see when you look at this? I asked, as we stood in what would become the main lobby. I see the future of Seattle's startup ecosystem. I see dozens of companies that will launch from here and go on to change the world. Do you see Theodore Walsh's vision? I see Theodore Walsh's vision evolved for the modern era. Community-driven, technology-enabled, globally connected. Do you see yourself as part of that future? I hope so, but that depends on you. I walked to the center of the space, where afternoon light streamed through tall windows. In 6 months, this would be filled with entrepreneurs working on ideas that could revolutionize industries. 5% equity, vesting over 4 years, with a 1-year cliff, I said finally. That's very generous. It's fair, but there are conditions. I'm listening. First, the personal services contract ends immediately. You're a business partner now, not my assistant. Agreed. Second, we establish clear roles and responsibilities. I remain CEO and majority owner. You become COO with defined operational authority. That works for me. Third, we sign a formal partnership agreement that includes non-compete clauses, confidentiality requirements, and dispute resolution procedures. Of course. And fourth, we agree that our personal history stays in the past. We're business partners moving forward, nothing more. Understood. We shook hands in the empty lobby, surrounded by construction dust and the sound of power tools. It felt like the end of one story and the beginning of another. Over the next 3 months, as winter turned to spring, Meridian Labs transformed from concept to reality. The building renovation stayed on schedule. Our first cohort of tenant companies was selected, and our launch date was confirmed for June. Working with Brennan as an equal partner rather than an employee changed our dynamic significantly. Instead of taking direction from me, he initiated projects and made independent decisions within his areas of responsibility. Instead of reporting to me daily, we held weekly strategy meetings and quarterly planning sessions. The professional distance we'd maintained began to feel more natural, less forced. We were building something together, and the work itself became more important than our complicated history. But late at night, when I was alone in my apartment, I sometimes wondered what might have happened if Brennan had seen my potential from the beginning. If he'd supported my ambition instead of dismissing it. If he'd believed in my vision when it was just code on a laptop instead of waiting until it became worth $50 million. Those thoughts felt dangerous because they led inevitably to the question I'd been avoiding. Was it possible to forgive someone who had changed so completely that they'd become a different person? How are things going with Brennan? My sister asked during one of our regular calls. Better than I expected. He's a good business partner. Just a business partner? What else would he be? I don't know. Someone you spend 60 hours a week with, building something you both care about deeply. We have clear boundaries. Do you want clear boundaries? I want to protect what we've built, both the business and my peace of mind. Those aren't necessarily incompatible, aren't they? Getting emotionally involved with a business partner is risky enough. Getting involved with a business partner who's also your ex-boyfriend seems like professional suicide. Or it seems like the natural evolution of two people who've grown past their mistakes. I didn't respond immediately because I didn't know how to respond. I'm not saying you should get back together, my sister continued. I'm saying you might want to examine whether your boundaries are protecting you or limiting you. The opening day of Meridian Labs was scheduled for June 15th, exactly 1 year after Brennan had left me for Veronica. The irony wasn't lost on either of us, though we didn't discuss it directly. 12 companies had been selected for our first cohort, representing industries from biotech to consumer apps to renewable energy. Each company received office space, mentorship, and access to our network of investors and advisors. Theodore Walsh's collaboration dinner tradition was revived with a launch celebration that brought together all our tenants, investors, advisors, and community partners. Held in the top floor conference space with views of Elliott Bay, the event felt like the culmination of everything we'd worked toward. I want to thank everyone who believed in this vision, I said during my opening remarks. Meridian Labs exists because innovative ideas deserve support, and because entrepreneurship thrives in community. I looked around the room at faces I'd come to know over the past months. Entrepreneurs who reminded me of my younger self, working on solutions to problems they'd identified and couldn't ignore. Investors who understood that early-stage funding was about more than financial returns. Advisors who remembered when they'd needed guidance and wanted to provide it to others. And Brennan, standing near the windows, taking photos of the event for our website and social media. Over the past year, he'd become someone I genuinely respected and trusted. Someone whose insights I valued and whose dedication I admired. Someone I was realizing I might be falling for all over again. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like a question I was finally ready to explore. After the formal dinner ended and most guests had left, Brennan and I found ourselves alone on the conference room balcony, looking out at the lights of Seattle. It's beautiful up here, he said. Theodore Walsh knew what he was doing when he chose this location. Can I ask you something? Sure. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd met now instead of 3 years ago? You mean if we'd met as the people we are today instead of the people we were then? Exactly. I considered the question carefully. If I'd met current Brennan, focused, ambitious, respectful of my work, under different circumstances, would I have been interested in him? I think we might have made a good team from the beginning, I said finally. Do you think we make a good team now? Professionally? Absolutely. I meant more generally. I turned to look at him directly. Brennan, are you asking what I think you're asking? I'm asking if there's any possibility that two people who've both changed significantly might be able to try again. Try what again? Try to see if the people we've become are compatible in ways the people we were couldn't be. The question hung in the air between us, complicated by everything we'd been through and everything we'd built together. That's a big risk, I said. The biggest things always are. If it doesn't work out, it could destroy the business partnership. If it does work out, it could be the best decision we've ever made. I looked out at the city lights, thinking about second chances and growth and the possibility that some things were worth the risk. I need time to think about it, I said. Of course. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. As I drove home that night, I thought about the conversation that had started this whole journey. Brennan dismissing my ambition over Chinese takeout, his certainty that Veronica represented the kind of success he wanted to be associated with. The woman who'd sat across from him that night, quietly eating fried rice while her future was dismissed, felt like a different person. Not because external circumstances had changed, but because she'd finally learned to trust her own judgment about what mattered. The man who'd packed his designer luggage and driven away felt like a different person too. Not because he'd lost everything, but because he'd discovered what he was capable of building when he cared about the outcome. The question was whether these two new people could create something together that the original versions never could have achieved. 3 weeks after the launch celebration, I made my decision. I've been thinking about what you said on the balcony, I told Brennan during one of our morning meetings. And I think you're right that we're both different people than we were a year ago. That sounds like the beginning of a but I need to know that if we try this, it's because you genuinely want to be with who I am now, not because you want to repair who we used to be. I want to be with who you are now. The woman who built an AI platform worth $50 million. The woman who created Meridian Labs. The woman who had the vision and courage to turn heartbreak into something meaningful. And I need to know that you understand why I structured our working relationship the way I did. Why I needed you to experience what it felt like to have someone else control your professional future. I understand, and I'm grateful for it. Working for you taught me things about myself I never would have learned otherwise. Are you sure this isn't just proximity? Spending so much time together, working toward shared goals? It might be partly that, but it's also about recognizing that the partnership we've built professionally is the foundation for the kind of relationship I always wanted but didn't know how to create. I studied his face, looking for signs of the man who'd dismissed my ambition and left me for someone whose success seemed more impressive than mine. Instead, I saw someone who'd learned to value substance over appearance, who'd discovered the satisfaction of building something meaningful from nothing. If we do this, we take it slowly, I said, however slow you want. And if it doesn't work, we end it cleanly without destroying what we've built professionally. Agreed. And you have to understand that I'm not the same person who used to care whether you approved of my goals. I don't need your validation anymore. I wouldn't want you to. The fact that you don't need my approval is part of what makes you attractive. That evening, Brennan picked me up for dinner at a restaurant neither of us had been to before. Neutral territory, he called it. A place where we could start fresh without the weight of history. This feels strange, I admitted as we looked over the menu. Good strange or bad strange? Uncertain strange. Like a first date between people who know too much about each other. Maybe that's an advantage. We can skip the part where we pretend to be better than we actually are. True. You already know I eat ramen for breakfast when I'm stressed. And you already know I order lo mein when I'm anxious. We ordered food and talked about everything except business. Our families, our college experiences, books we'd read recently, movies we wanted to see, conversations we'd somehow never had during our original relationship when everything had been filtered through our different ideas about success and ambition. Can I ask you something? I said over dessert. Anything. When you were with Veronica, did you love her? Or did you love what she represented? He thought about the question for a long time. I think I loved the idea of her. The idea of being with someone whose success was obvious and undeniable. Someone who made me feel important by association. And me? You. I loved as a person. But I didn't love what you represented because I couldn't see what you represented. And now? Now I love both. The person you are and what you've accomplished. What if I hadn't accomplished anything? What if the startup had failed and I was still coding in my pajamas? Then I'd love the person who was brave enough to try something difficult, even if it didn't work out. It was the right answer, but I wasn't sure if I believed it completely. Brennan, I need you to understand something. My worth isn't determined by the success of my company or the amount of money in my bank account. It wasn't determined by those things when we were together before either. I know that now. Do you? Or do you know it intellectually but still feel it differently? I know it because working with you every day has shown me how you think, how you solve problems, how you treat people. Your value as a person is completely separate from your external achievements. But you couldn't see that before. I was looking for the wrong things. I was measuring success by metrics that didn't actually matter. What changed? Having to build something myself. Having to work for goals that mattered to me personally. Understanding the difference between achievement and accomplishment. What's the difference? Achievement is what other people can see. Accomplishment is what you know you've done. We walked back to my apartment slowly, taking the long route through downtown Seattle. The Meridian building was lit up against the night sky. Construction crews working late to meet our timeline. Thank you for giving me a second chance, Brennan said as we reached my door. This isn't a second chance. This is a first chance for two people who didn't exist before. He kissed me goodnight, carefully, tentatively, like someone who understood that trust had to be rebuilt one moment at a time. Over the next 3 months, we developed a routine that balanced our professional partnership with our emerging personal relationship. We maintained separate living spaces but spent most evenings together, either working on Meridian Labs projects or exploring Seattle neighborhoods we'd never visited. We established ground rules about discussing business during personal time and personal matters during business hours. We agreed to be completely honest about any concerns or doubts, even if the conversations were difficult. Most importantly, we committed to ending things cleanly if the relationship threatened our professional partnership or the success of Meridian Labs. How's it going with Brennan? My sister asked during one of our regular calls. Better than I expected. Different than before. Good different. Mature different. We talk about things now instead of avoiding them. We address problems instead of hoping they'll resolve themselves. Do you trust him? I'm learning to. It's a process. Are you happy? I considered the question carefully. Happy felt like too simple a word for what I was experiencing. I'm satisfied. With the business, with the relationship, with the choices I've made. That's more than I had a year ago. That sounds like a pretty good place to be. It is. But I'm still careful not to invest more emotionally than I can afford to lose. Is that sustainable long term? I don't know. We'll find out. The first year of Meridian Labs exceeded every projection we'd made. All 12 companies in our initial cohort met their development milestones. 3 had completed Series A funding rounds, and 2 had been acquired by larger corporations. The pay-it-forward tradition we'd established was already creating results. One of our acquired companies had committed to funding the next cohort's marketing expenses. Another had agreed to provide pro bono legal services to all Meridian Labs tenants. Theodore Walsh's vision of entrepreneurs supporting entrepreneurs was thriving in ways I'd never imagined possible. We should expand, Brennan suggested during one of our quarterly planning meetings. There's demand for twice as many spaces as we can currently offer. Expand how? We're using every square foot of the building. Buy another building. Franchise the model to other cities. License our methodology to existing accelerators. That's a big leap from where we are now. So was starting this in the first place. He was right. Every significant decision we'd made had required taking risks that felt too big at the time. Let's research the options, I said. But we move carefully. Rapid expansion destroys more companies than slow growth. Agreed. Quality over quantity. That evening, as we walked through the building after hours, I felt a sense of accomplishment that was deeper than anything I'd experienced when I sold my first company. Do you know what I love most about this place? I asked Brennan as we stood in the lobby. Tell me. It's not just about the companies we're helping. It's about proving that supporting others is good business, that community and competition can coexist. Theodore Walsh would be proud. I think he'd be surprised by how much the fundamentals haven't changed. People still need space to create, resources to grow, and community to sustain them. And vision to see possibilities that don't exist yet. I looked at him, remembering the man who'd once dismissed my vision as impractical dreaming. Speaking of vision, what do you see when you look at our future, personal and professional? Professionally, I see Meridian Labs becoming a national model for startup support. I see us helping hundreds of companies get started and watching them change the world. And personally, I see us continuing to grow as individuals and as partners. I see us proving that some relationships can survive fundamental changes and become stronger because of them. That's very optimistic. I've learned that optimism is usually just realism with a longer timeline. On the 2-year anniversary of Brennan leaving me for Veronica, we hosted the second annual Theodore Walsh Collaboration Dinner. The guest list had expanded to include our original 12 companies, the new cohort of 15 companies, dozens of investors and advisors, and entrepreneurs from around the Pacific Northwest. Mrs. Chen, now a regular attendee and unofficial historian of our events, gave a toast honoring Theodore Walsh's legacy and the modern entrepreneurs who were carrying it forward. Theodore believed that success was meant to be shared, she said, raising her glass. Looking around this room, I see that his vision is alive and well. After the formal dinner ended, Brennan and I found ourselves on the same balcony where he'd asked about trying again 18 months earlier. 2 years ago tonight, you were packing your bags, I said. 2 years ago tonight, I made the biggest mistake of my life. Do you really think it was a mistake? If you hadn't left, none of this would exist. The business would exist. Your success would exist. You would have built something incredible regardless of what I did. But would we have built it together? No. The person I was then wouldn't have been capable of being your partner. And the person I was then might not have been capable of letting you be my partner. We stood quietly, looking out at the city lights and thinking about alternate histories and the strange ways that painful experiences can lead to unexpected growth. I have something for you, Brennan said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small wrapped box. Brennan, it's not what you think. Open it. Inside was a key, old and tarnished, attached to a small brass tag. It's the original key to Theodore Walsh's office, he said. Mrs. Chen found it in her husband's papers and thought you should have it. This is incredible, but why are you giving it to me? Because you're the one who brought his vision back to life. And because I wanted to mark this anniversary differently than the way I marked it 2 years ago. How did you mark it 2 years ago? By running away from something I didn't understand. This time, I'm choosing to stay and build something I believe in. I held the key, feeling its weight and imagining the history it represented. What do you think Theodore Walsh would say about second chances? I asked. I think he'd say they're not really second chances. They're opportunities to become the people we were always capable of being. And what do you think he'd say about forgiveness? I think he'd say forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about choosing what happens next. 3 months later, Brennan moved into my apartment. Not because our relationship had reached some predetermined milestone, but because we'd discovered that we worked better together than apart in every aspect of our lives. He converted the spare bedroom into a home office where he handled Meridian Labs' administrative work. I kept my kitchen table set up where I'd first built my AI platform, now using it for strategic planning and creative thinking. Do you ever miss your old life? I asked him one evening as we cooked dinner together. Which old life? The one where I worked a job I hated, dated someone I didn't understand, and had no clear sense of purpose? The one where everything was easier, where success was handed to you instead of something you had to build? That wasn't success. That was just comfort. And no, I don't miss it. What do you miss? I miss the certainty I used to feel about the future. Before I understood how much work it takes to build something meaningful. Is uncertainty necessarily bad? No. Uncertainty means possibility. It means we're still growing. Are you happy? I asked. I'm fulfilled, which is better than happy because it's based on what I'm contributing rather than what I'm receiving. That's very wise. I learned it from someone I know. 6 months later, we announced the expansion of Meridian Labs to Portland and San Francisco. The franchise model Brennan had proposed was working better than we'd projected, with local entrepreneurs in each city adapting our methodology to their specific markets. Theodore Walsh's Pay It Forward tradition was spreading organically as successful companies from our original cohort helped fund and mentor programs in other cities. We're creating a network, I told a reporter from Fast Company. Not just of companies, but of people who understand that entrepreneurship is most successful when it's collaborative rather than competitive. What's next for Meridian Labs? The reporter asked. We're exploring international expansion, but slowly. We want to make sure we maintain the community focus that makes this model work. And personally, are you and your business partner planning any changes? I looked at Brennan, who was standing nearby reviewing our latest quarterly results. We're focused on building something sustainable for the long term, I said, both professionally and personally. That evening, Brennan surprised me with a dinner reservation at the restaurant where we'd had our first post-breakup meal as business partners. Why here? I asked as we sat down. Because this is where we started over. I wanted to celebrate how far we've come. What are we celebrating specifically? 3 successful years of Meridian Labs, 47 companies launched, 15 successful exits, hundreds of jobs created. Those are good numbers. And 2 people who figured out how to transform a painful ending into a meaningful beginning. Also good numbers. There's something else I wanted to discuss, he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. Brennan, if that's what I think it is, it's not what you think it is. He pulled out a legal document. It's a partnership agreement, for life, personal and professional. I stared at the papers, not understanding. I'm asking you to marry me, he said, but I'm also asking you to be my business partner, my creative collaborator, and my co-conspirator in whatever we build next. Marriage as a business proposition? Marriage as recognition that what we've built together is bigger than either of us individually, that we're better as a team than as separate people. I read through the document. It was partly a prenuptial agreement, partly a business partnership contract, partly a commitment to shared values and goals. This is the most unromantic proposal in the history of proposals, I said. It's the most honest proposal I could make. Romance is about fantasy. This is about reality. And you think reality is more important than romance? I think reality with the right person is the most romantic thing possible. I looked around the restaurant, remembering the last time we'd been here. How carefully we'd maintained professional distance. How uncertain I'd been about trusting him again. What happens if the business fails? I asked. Then we build something else. What happens if the marriage fails? Then we end it as thoughtfully as we began it. What happens if we succeed beyond our wildest dreams? Then we use our success to help other people build their wildest dreams. I signed the partnership agreement that night, at the same table where we'd negotiated our first business arrangement 3 years earlier. We were married 6 months later in the top floor conference room of the Meridian building, surrounded by the entrepreneurs and companies we'd helped launch. Mrs. Chen officiated the ceremony, reading from letters Theodore Walsh had written to his wife about their shared commitment to supporting innovation and community. Theodore Walsh believed that the best partnerships were built on shared vision, rather than shared history, she said. He believed that some relationships are worth rebuilding from the ground up, when the people involved are willing to do the work. As we exchanged vows, I thought about the woman who'd sat quietly eating Chinese takeout while her boyfriend dismissed her ambition. She couldn't have imagined this moment, but she'd made it possible by refusing to accept someone else's definition of her worth. I thought about the man who'd packed his designer luggage and driven away toward what he thought was a more successful future. He couldn't have imagined this moment either, but he'd made it possible by learning to value substance over appearance. Most of all, I thought about Theodore Walsh's vision of entrepreneurs supporting entrepreneurs and how it had evolved into something bigger than business success. It had become a model for human relationships based on mutual support, shared growth, and the understanding that the best partnerships are built on bringing out the best in each other rather than competing for individual advantage. Do you take this partnership seriously? Mrs. Chen asked, using the language we'd requested instead of traditional marriage vows. I do, we said together. Do you commit to supporting each other's growth, even when it requires difficult conversations or personal change? I do. Do you promise to use whatever success you achieve together to create opportunities for others? I do. Then by the power vested in me by the state of Washington and the spirit of Theodore Walsh, I pronounce you partners for life. 5 years later, Meridian Labs operates in 12 cities and has helped launch over 300 companies. Our alumni network includes 2 unicorn startups, dozens of successful exits, and hundreds of ongoing businesses that employ thousands of people. The Theodore Walsh Collaboration Dinners have become annual events in each city, bringing together entrepreneurs, investors, and community leaders to share resources and celebrate successes. Brennan and I have written a book about transforming personal setbacks into professional opportunities, which became a bestseller and led to speaking engagements around the world. But the thing I'm most proud of is simpler than any business metric. We've proven that people can change, relationships can be rebuilt, and painful endings can become meaningful beginnings when both parties are willing to do the hard work of becoming better versions of themselves. The spare bedroom in our apartment still contains whiteboards covered with algorithms and business plans, but now they're surrounded by photos of wedding guests, thank you notes from successful entrepreneurs, and architectural drawings for our next expansion. Yesterday, a young woman contacted us through the Meridian Labs website. She'd been working on an AI project from her kitchen table, couldn't get investors to take her seriously, and was starting to doubt whether her vision was realistic. Her story sounded familiar. We invited her to visit our original building in Seattle, where Mrs. Chen still gives tours and shares Theodore Walsh's history with new entrepreneurs. The most important thing to remember, I told her as we stood in the lobby, is that your worth isn't determined by other people's ability to see your potential. What if I can't see my own potential? Then you surround yourself with people who can see it until you learn to see it yourself. As she left with applications for our next cohort, Brennan put his arm around my shoulders. Think she'll make it? He asked. I think she'll make whatever she decides to make. That's what this place is about. What do you think Theodore Walsh would say about what we've built here? I think he'd say we proved his point. That success is most meaningful when it's shared, that community creates better outcomes than competition, and that the best partnerships are built on bringing out the best in each other. And what would he say about second chances? That they're not really second chances. They're first chances for people who've learned enough to deserve them. We walked home through downtown Seattle, past the restaurants where we'd negotiated our business relationship, past the coffee shops where we'd planned our expansion, past the construction sites where other entrepreneurs were building their dreams. The city lights reflected off Elliott Bay, just as they had the night Brennan asked me about trying again. But now, instead of uncertainty about the future, I felt gratitude for a present that had exceeded anything I'd imagined possible. Some stories end with getting what you always wanted. This story ended with discovering that what I'd always wanted wasn't ambitious enough. Building a successful company was satisfying. Building a model for supporting other entrepreneurs was fulfilling. But building a partnership that proved people could change, grow, and create something better together than they ever could have achieved alone, that was the most meaningful accomplishment of all. And it started with a woman eating Chinese takeout, quietly building something extraordinary while someone who claimed to love her dismissed her ambition as unrealistic. Sometimes the best revenge is living well. Sometimes it's proving that the person who underestimated you was wrong about everything that mattered. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it's discovering that even the people who hurt you can learn to become worthy of the potential they once failed to see.